The universe had a sick sense of humor. Of all the places for first contact to occur, it had to be at Pete's Coffee Corner in downtown Seattle, where the most exciting thing to happen in the last decade was someone ordering a decaf during morning rush hour. The rain drummed steadily against the windows as barista Pete Thompson hummed along to some ancient pop song, doing what he did best, making people's mornings marginally better, with perfectly crafted cups of caffeine. He'd just finished drawing an intricate leaf pattern in the foam of a latte when the sky turned an impossible shade of purple. "Huh," he muttered, squinting through the storefront window. "That's new." His customers, mostly regulars who'd been coming to his shop for years, barely looked up from their phones and laptops. This was Seattle, after all. Weird weather was about as surprising as traffic on the I-5. The massive ship that materialized above the Space Needle, however, that got their attention. "Anyone else seeing this?" Pete called out, though it was hardly necessary. Every face in the shop was now pressed against the windows, phones recording what would later be known as humanity's first documented encounter with extraterrestrial life. The ship, a sleek vessel that looked like someone had taken every sci-fi movie ever made and thrown them into a blender, descended with all the grace of a drunk peacock. It landed right in the middle of the street, crushing several cars and a particularly unfortunate hot dog stand. The beings that emerged were tall, elegantly proportioned, and covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Their four eyes blinked in sequence, and their mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance at the drizzling rain. Pete, being the kind of person who believed good customer service transcended species, did what came naturally. He grabbed his best cup of house blend and walked out to greet them. "Welcome to Earth," he called out cheerfully. "Coffee?" The aliens' translator devices took a moment to process this. Their response, when it came, was less than diplomatic. "You dare offer us your toxic stimulant brew?" The lead alien's voice boomed, somehow managing to sound both offended and confused. "This is a Class 3 restricted substance in 17 star systems." Pete looked down at his coffee cup, then back at the aliens. "It's just a medium roast," he shrugged. "Though I've got some nice herbal tea if you'd prefer." What happened next would be debated in galactic courts for centuries to come. The alien leader, apparently following some obscure protocol about handling illegal substance distributors, raised what looked like a ceremonial staff. There was a flash of light, a smell like burnt cinnamon, and Pete Thompson, maker of Seattle's best lattes, tender of humanity's caffeine needs, and Earth's first ambassador to alien life, was reduced to a small pile of very well-ground coffee beans. The entire coffee shop fell silent. Then someone whispered, "They killed Pete." The alien delegation, apparently satisfied with their handling of this obvious criminal, turned to address the gathering crowd. "Your planet is now under the protection of the Galactic Confederation. Resistance is..." They never got to finish that sentence because at that precise moment, every single one of Pete's regular customers, lawyers, tech workers, students, and one very angry knitting circle, decided that these aliens needed to learn a very important lesson about messing with people's baristas. Looking back, historians would agree that this was probably not what the aliens had expected from their simple conquest of a pre-FTL civilization. But then again, they really should have done their homework about humans and their coffee. News of the Seattle coffee incident spread faster than a cat video on social media. Within hours, #Justice for Pete and #Don't Mess with Our Baristas were trending worldwide. Within days, something unprecedented happened. The entire world agreed on something. The United Nations emergency session looked more like a coffee shop than a diplomatic meeting. Representatives sipped lattes and espressos while discussing humanity's response to the alien threat. The Russian delegate actually shared his biscotti with the American representative, a gesture that made several historians faint. "They think we're primitive?" The Chinese ambassador stirred her cappuccino thoughtfully. "Let's show them what primitive can do." The Galactic Confederation had expected Earth to submit quietly to their rule, like most developing planets did. What they got instead was a masterclass in human adaptability and spite. When the aliens disabled all nuclear weapons, humanity switched to conventional warfare. When they neutralized gunpowder, humans dug up medieval weaponry. When they created energy shields against metallic projectiles, someone in Minnesota figured out how to weaponize rubber bands and paper clips. It's fascinating, Dr. Rashid explained to the UN Security Council while demonstrating a captured alien pistol that had been modified to run on Red Bull. Their technology is advanced, but it's rigid. They've never had to adapt or improvise because they've always been at the top of the food chain. We, on the other hand. He paused to dodge a paper airplane that had been weaponized with alien tech. We've been improvising since we figured out rocks could be tools. The alien occupiers found themselves increasingly baffled by human resistance tactics. Their combat manuals had no protocols for dealing with flash mobs that turned into guerrilla strike teams, or viral TikTok challenges that somehow resulted in their ships being covered in glitter that their sensors couldn't detect. In Mumbai, a group of engineering students figured out how to hack alien communication systems using modified smartphones and a toaster. When asked how they managed it, their response was, "We had to submit our project yesterday and the aliens destroyed our lab. We got creative." The breakthrough came 3 months after the invasion in an unlikely place, a kindergarten in Helsinki. 5-year-old Mika had been playing with an alien device that had fallen from a ship, using it as a crayon holder. When her teacher tried to take it away, they discovered the device had somehow integrated with her finger painting and created a working holographic display. "Kids," the teacher had muttered, "they'll figure out any new technology if you give them 5 minutes." This led to the formation of the Children's Technology Integration Initiative, which basically involved giving kids alien tech and watching what they did with it. Within weeks, they had insights that adult scientists had missed completely. As one researcher noted, they're not blocked by preconceptions about what's impossible. The aliens' biggest mistake wasn't underestimating human military capability, it was underestimating human ingenuity. While they were busy trying to suppress Earth's major military powers, they completely missed the garage inventors, the hobby engineers, the DIY enthusiasts who looked at alien technology and thought, "I bet I could make this better with duct tape." 6 months after the invasion began, humanity had reverse-engineered enough alien technology to start fighting back effectively. Coffee shops around the world had been converted into resistance planning centers. It turned out that the combination of caffeine and righteous anger was particularly effective for innovation. The Galactic Confederation's reports back to their high command became increasingly confused. "Humans have modified our shield technology to run on something called espresso. We're not sure what it is, but it's making their ships twice as fast. They've somehow turned our sonic weapons into something called a portable dance party. Morale is suffering. Request immediate clarification. What is a meme war and why is it so effective?" As Earth's resistance grew stronger, the aliens began to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. They had expected to find a primitive species ready for assimilation. Instead, they found humanity, caffeinated, creative, and really annoyed. The first organized strike against the Galactic Confederation came from an unlikely source, a coalition of paintball enthusiasts, parkour practitioners, and retired circus performers. They called themselves the Ground Creative Response Unit, though most people just called them the Weird War Division. Their first target was an alien outpost in Berlin. The attack began with what appeared to be a flash mob performing to "Never Gonna Give You Up." The aliens, still trying to understand human culture, were completely distracted by what their cultural analysis software insisted was a traditional Earth war dance. That's when the paintballers struck. They'd modified their guns with reversed-engineered alien tech, loading them with a mixture of paint and the same particles the aliens used in their shield systems. The result, every hit temporarily disrupted the aliens' personal shields while simultaneously marking them with neon pink paint. "You should see their faces," reported Agent Ling, leader of the assault team. "Well, their mandibles anyway. They keep checking their tactical manuals, but there's nothing in there about dealing with humans sliding down banisters while shooting paint at them." The Berlin attack was just the beginning. Around the world, resistance cells started employing what they called annoyingly effective warfare. The aliens' superior technology proved surprisingly vulnerable to what humans did best, thinking outside the box and being absolutely ridiculous. In Rio de Janeiro, a group of capoeira dancers incorporated stolen alien energy weapons into their movements, turning their performances into devastating combat routines. The aliens couldn't track the attacks because their combat computers classified the movements as interpretive dance. A knitting circle in Edinburgh figured out that the aliens' advanced armor was vulnerable to wool. Something about the natural fibers interfered with their temperature regulation systems. Soon they were mass-producing what they called combat cozies, sweaters that could disable alien troops on contact. "It's not even tactical," complained one alien commander in an intercepted transmission. "They're covered in little patterns that their database identifies as cute puppies wearing berets." The Australian contribution to the resistance was particularly notorious. They'd discovered that their local wildlife could be equipped with modified alien tracking devices, turning them into what they called the Combat Critter Division. The aliens quickly learned to fear the sight of a kangaroo wearing what looked suspiciously like a jetpack. "Look," explained Major Davidson to an embedded journalist while watching a coalition of emus systematically dismantling an alien patrol, "we've been dealing with murderous wildlife for generations. This is just giving them an upgrade." The aliens' biggest problem was that their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming technological superiority. They had no protocols for dealing with humans who treated combat like an improv comedy show with explosions. In Japan, a group of gamers reprogrammed captured alien robots using old Nintendo controllers. The aliens were forced to retreat from Tokyo after their own security droids started challenging them to Pokemon battles. The Resistance's most effective tactic, however, was what they called weaponized confusion. Humans had discovered that alien AI had a complete meltdown when faced with human illogic. They exploited this mercilessly. During the Battle of Mumbai, resistance fighters drove back an alien advance by having everyone pretend they couldn't see the aliens at all. The alien troops, faced with humans who walked right past them while having loud conversations about the weather, suffered what their psychologists would later term a collective existential crisis. In Chicago, defenders simply responded to alien demands with dad jokes. The resulting confusion gave the resistance enough time to evacuate half the city. The alien commander's report simply read, "They asked why we don't use elevators in space. The answer was that they raised too many questions. Request immediate psychological evaluation of species." But perhaps the most devastating human tactic was something the resistance dubbed Operation Earworm. They discovered that playing certain songs on a loop could completely disrupt alien neural networks. The extraterrestrial occupation of Los Angeles ended after a 48-hour exposure to Baby Shark. "We're not barbarians," General Chen explained when questioned about the tactic. "We only use Baby Shark as a last resort. Usually, What's New Pussycat played 7 times with one It's Not Unusual in the middle is enough." By the end of the first year, the aliens had lost control of most major cities. Their reports back to high command had become increasingly desperate. "The humans are not following any known combat doctrine. They appear to be making it up as they go along, and somehow it's working. They've started naming their combat units after what they call memes. We're retreating from Paris after suffering heavy casualties from something called Doge Squadron. Request clarification. What is a yeet and why do our troops panic when humans yell it?" The final straw came during the liberation of London. The resistance coordinator, a retired drama teacher, orchestrated what she called a proper British response. 5 million people simultaneously tutted and muttered, "How disappointing," at the alien forces. The psychological impact was devastating. As one alien anthropologist noted in their report, "They've turned passive aggressiveness into a weapon of mass destruction. We're not equipped for this level of warfare." Humanity's breakthrough into faster-than-light travel happened exactly how no one expected it would, through a combination of a malfunctioning microwave, 3 rubber bands, and what was later discovered to be a misplaced decimal point in the calculations. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had been trying to heat up her leftover pizza in the research facility's break room when it happened. The microwave, which had been jury-rigged with alien tech to make it heat food evenly, a breakthrough in itself, suddenly created a localized space-time distortion that sent her pizza to Alpha Centauri. "Well," she said, staring at the empty microwave, "that's one way to deal with Monday's leftovers." Within months, humanity had refined what they called the pizza drive into a viable FTL system. The aliens were horrified to discover that humans had achieved in months, through what amounted to a kitchen accident, what had taken their civilization millennia of careful research. They're not even following proper scientific protocols, one alien scientist complained. They just keep trying things until something works. The first human-built starship, christened Pete's Revenge in honor of the fallen barista, launched from Earth carrying a crew that perfectly exemplified humanity's approach to space exploration. The captain was a former food truck operator who'd shown an uncanny knack for navigating tight spaces. The chief engineer was a teenager who'd won her position by building a working replica of the Enterprise in Minecraft using salvaged alien tech. Their first colonial expedition targeted a planet that the aliens had designated as completely uninhabitable due to its extreme conditions. Humans took one look at the environment, compared it to Australia, and decided it was perfect. They named it New Seattle, despite it having 3 suns and purple sand. The first thing they built was, of course, a coffee shop. As humanity spread across the stars, they discovered they weren't the only species that had suffered under the Galactic Confederation's protection. The Zixthar, a species of silicon-based beings, had been relegated to mining planets because the Confederation considered their crystal-based technology primitive. They took one look at humanity's rubber band-powered FTL drive and immediately pledged their allegiance. The Marrow, cat-like creatures who'd been dismissed as too easily distracted for advanced civilization, found kindred spirits in humans. Together, they developed a navigation system based on the principle of if I fits, I sits that revolutionized space travel. Even the Bloopeth, a species of sentient liquid, joined the human cause after witnessing a human drinking something called a mega monster energy slushy. If they can handle that, the Bloopeth leader gurgled, they can handle anything. Human military bases sprung up across the galaxy, each with its own distinctive character. The Martian base specialized in zero-gravity paintball warfare. The Europa station became famous for its ice-skating commando units. The base on Proxima Centauri b was technically a beach resort that happened to have plasma cannons, but it was the human approach to diplomacy that really changed the galaxy. While the Confederation relied on rigid protocols and complex hierarchies, humans introduced what they called the coffee shop protocol. Every human base, ship, and colony had a dedicated space for different species to sit down, share their preferred beverages, and complain about their problems. It's remarkable, noted a Zixthar anthropologist, they've weaponized small talk. The alliance grew stronger as more species joined what humans had started calling the Intergalactic Coffee Break Coalition. The Confederation's carefully maintained order began to crumble as their former subjects realized that there was an alternative to their rigid control. The turning point came when humans introduced the concept of happy hour to the galaxy. The idea that you could get discounted drinks at specific times of day somehow managed to unite species that had been at war for millennia. Human colonies became known as havens for innovation, mainly because they operated on the principle of, why not give it a try? The Confederation's scientists were horrified to discover that some of the most significant technological breakthroughs were happening in what humans called garage workshops and craft fairs. One particularly successful human space station was literally held together by duct tape and optimism. When Confederation engineers insisted this was impossible, the station's commander just shrugged and said, "Tell that to the duct tape." The humans' habit of naming things inappropriately also spread through their allies. Soon, fearsome warships bore names like Fluffy and Boaty McBoatface 7. One particularly devastating human battlecruiser was called Timeout Corner. "It's psychological warfare," explained Admiral Chen to a group of alien allies. "Nothing terrifies an enemy quite like being defeated by something called the Cuddly Bunny of Doom." As the alliance grew, the humans' influence began to show in unexpected ways. The previously stoic Zixthar started holding crystal comedy nights. The Marrow incorporated laser pointer targeting systems into their ships. The Bloopeth developed a taste for bubble tea. The Confederation's reports became increasingly alarming. They're spreading their chaos throughout the galaxy, and everyone seems to be enjoying it. The humans have introduced something called Casual Friday to space combat. We're not sure what it means, but our troops are traumatized. Update on human expansion. They're not colonizing planets anymore. They're adopting them. The Galactic campaign began with what historians would later call the Great Rickroll of Sector 7. The human-led alliance hijacked every communication channel in the Confederation's central systems to broadcast "Never Gonna Give You Up" on loop. The Confederation's AI networks crashed, trying to decipher what they believed was an encrypted message of profound importance. "It's beautiful." Admiral Chen wiped away a tear as she watched the Confederation's flagship fleet scramble in confusion. They've spent the last hour trying to decode the dance moves. The Alliance's first major offensive targeted the Confederation's most secure stronghold, their central bureaucratic hub. The humans' battle plan was deemed absolutely insane by traditional military standards, which meant it worked perfectly. Phase 1 involved flooding the Confederation's paperwork system with human insurance claim forms. The bureaucrats, faced with trying to process documents that included questions like, was the spacecraft damage caused by an act of God, and if so, which one, suffered a collective mental breakdown. Phase 2 introduced what humans called IT department warfare. A team of human tech support professionals contacted the Confederation's help desk and kept them tied up for weeks with questions about whether they'd tried turning their defense systems off and on again. The Maro contributed to the campaign by introducing chaos into the Confederation's perfectly organized storage systems. "If they fits, they sits" became a battle cry, as Maro operatives systematically sat in every box, container and storage unit they could find, completely disrupting supply lines. The Zichithar, embracing human meme culture with enthusiasm, began leaving cryptic crystal formations everywhere with the inscription, "Here comes dat boy." Confederation archaeologists wasted months trying to decode what they believed were ancient prophecies. Even the Bluepeth got in on the psychological warfare, learning to shape themselves into what humans called reaction memes. The sight of a sentient liquid forming a perfect surprised Pikachu face was enough to send many Confederation commanders into early retirement. The Alliance's fleet names alone caused considerable psychological damage. The Confederation's admirals found it increasingly difficult to maintain their dignity while reporting defeats by ships named "You, what's this?" and "That's what she said." But it was the human tendency to turn anything into a competition that really changed the face of galactic warfare. They introduced a point system for creative battle tactics that quickly caught on with their allies. The resulting Galactic Got Talent Warfare Edition led to some of the most spectacular and bewildering battles in galactic history. Did that human ship just defeat our dreadnought by performing a perfect parallel parking maneuver? One Confederation commander asked in disbelief. 10 points for style, 3 for practicality, and a bonus point for doing it while playing Running in the 90s, confirmed his second-in-command. The Alliance's ground forces were equally creative. Human Marines introduced their alien allies to the art of the Naruto run, which proved surprisingly effective against Confederation targeting systems. The Zichithar developed crystal armor that played "You Can't Touch This" when hit. The Maro perfected the tactical equivalent of knocking things off high places. One particularly memorable battle was one when a human commander challenged a Confederation fleet to a dance-off. While the enemy was trying to process this clearly illegal battle protocol, 3 Bluepeth ships slipped through their defenses disguised as particularly funky space debris. The humans' habit of naming military operations after pop culture references added another layer of psychological warfare. Operation Pokémon, Gotta Free Them All, liberated 17 conquered species. Project Leroy Jenkins resulted in the successful capture of the Confederation's largest shipyard, though no one was quite sure how. "The worst part," one Confederation psychologist reported, "is that they're having fun. They're dismantling our entire civilization, and they're treating it like a party game." Indeed, human influence had spread far beyond military tactics. Conquered species inspired by Earth's example began their own rebellions. The Confederation was horrified to discover that their former subjects were using things like flash mobs and viral videos as revolutionary tools. The Pixis, a species of highly logical energy beings, embraced human internet culture with particular enthusiasm. They began communicating entirely in cat memes, making their transmissions completely indecipherable to Confederation intelligence. The Wobble, named by humans, much to their chagrin, turned their natural ability to manipulate gravity into what they called sick dance moves after watching human breakdancing videos. Confederation troops learned to retreat at the first sign of someone starting to windmill. Even the fearsome Hergath, a warrior species known for their stoic demeanor, got into the spirit of things. They started rating their battles on a scale of chugi to based, terms that somehow made it into official military reports. The Alliance's intelligence operations were equally unconventional. Human hackers introduced computer viruses that did nothing but replace all official documents with stonks memes. The Zizixthar developed crystals that broadcast All-Star by Smashmouth on all frequencies. The Murrow's contribution was simply to knock important things off desks across the galaxy. The Confederation's final mistake was attempting to understand and counter human meme warfare. They established an entire research division dedicated to studying human culture, which promptly went insane trying to explain the strategic significance of Doge to their superior officers. Their reports became increasingly desperate. The humans have somehow weaponized something called vibe check. We have no defense against this. Emergency update. They've taught the Blue Peeth about TikTok dances. Sector 9 has fallen to a choreographed routine. They're not even trying to hide their plans anymore. They're just sending messages saying LOL and yeet before attacks, and it's still working. One particularly notable victory came when humans introduced their allies to the concept of malicious compliance. Entire Confederation systems fell to carefully coordinated campaigns of following their own regulations to the letter. They've figured out how to turn our own bureaucracy against us, one Confederation administrator wailed. They're filling out all the forms, all of them, in triplicate. The campaign reached new heights when the Alliance discovered that the Confederation's leadership had never heard of reverse psychology. The resulting operation, which consisted entirely of humans very seriously telling the Confederation not to surrender under any circumstances, led to the fall of 3 major strongholds. As the campaign progressed, it became clear that the Confederation's biggest weakness was its inability to adapt to humanity's chaos. They had built their empire on order, protocol, and predictability. They had no defense against a species that treated galactic warfare like an improv comedy show with explosions. The final confrontation with the Galactic Confederation's Supreme Council took place in their Grand Citadel, a structure so pompously elaborate it made Versailles look like a garden shed. Humanity's delegation arrived in a ship they'd nicknamed the Space Minivan, complete with a baby on board sticker. Admiral Chen led the human delegation, accompanied by representatives from their allied species. They'd chosen to wear what they called their casual Friday best, which meant Hawaiian shirts under their military uniforms. The Confederation leaders were already twitching. "You've disrupted the carefully maintained order of our civilization," the Supreme Chancellor declared, mandibles clicking in irritation. "You've turned our subject species against us, undermined our authority, and worst of all, you've made us look ridiculous." "That's fair," Admiral Chen shrugged, taking a sip from her world's okayest Admiral mug. "But you did kill our barista." The Chancellor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "That's what this was all about? One insignificant food service worker?" The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as every human present set down their coffee cups with precise, controlled movements. "About that," Chen said, her smile now sharp enough to cut diamonds. "We've been wondering why you chose Earth for your first contact. Care to explain?" The Chancellor gestured to a holographic display. "Our analysis showed Earth was perfect for conquest. You had no unified government, no advanced space travel, and you spent most of your resources on what appeared to be elaborate caffeinated drink preparation rituals. We calculated a 99.97% chance of immediate surrender." The human delegation burst out laughing. The Chancellor's mandibles twitched in confusion. "Let me get this straight," Chen wiped tears from her eyes. "You saw a species so devoted to coffee that they built entire chains of stores just to serve different variations of it, and you thought we'd be easy to conquer. A species that invented 20 different ways to prepare beans in hot water because the first 19 weren't quite perfect." "The data suggested," the Chancellor began. "The data suggested," Chen interrupted, "that we're stubborn enough to spend centuries perfecting hot bean juice, creative enough to turn it into an art form, and caffeinated enough to never, ever give up." Right on cue, the Bluepith representative morphed into a perfect recreation of the well, how the turntables meme. The council chambers erupted in chaos as the Confederation leaders realized they'd made possibly the biggest strategic blunder in galactic history. They'd mistaken humanity's diversity for weakness, their creativity for primitive behavior, and their caffeine addiction for religious obsession. "We hereby demand your unconditional surrender," Chen announced, "or we'll be forced to deploy our ultimate weapon." The Chancellor scoffed. "What could you possibly—" "We'll teach every species in the galaxy to use Twitter." The surrender was signed within minutes. As the council was being escorted out, one junior administrator turned to Chen. "I don't understand. How did you do it? How did your species manage to unite the galaxy against us?" Chen smiled, pulling out a familiar coffee cup, the same one Pete had offered to the first aliens in Seattle. "We did what humans do best. We took something simple, made it unnecessarily complicated, got ridiculously passionate about it, and then shared it with everyone we met. Whether that's coffee, memes, or revolution, well, that's just a matter of brewing method." The administrator stared at the cup. "But that's not logical." "Exactly," Chen grinned, "and that's why we won." 10 years after the Great Coffee Revolution, as historians now called it, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The former Confederation citadel had been converted into what humans called a space mall, complete with 17 different coffee shop chains. The Supreme Council chambers were now Pete's intergalactic coffee corner, the most popular diplomatic meeting spot in known space. Species that had once been bitter enemies now argued about coffee brewing techniques instead of territorial disputes. The Zigthar had developed crystal cups that kept drinks at perfect temperature. The Muro had perfected the art of latte art in zero gravity. Even the Bloopeth had found their calling as the galaxy's most innovative baristas. Turns out being a sentient liquid gave you a unique perspective on fluid dynamics. The former Confederation leaders had been sentenced to what humans considered the most fitting punishment, customer service training. They now served as baristas, learning the hard way about the importance of getting orders right and dealing with customers before their morning coffee. And in a small corner of Pete's intergalactic coffee corner, next to a window overlooking the galaxy they'd helped unite, sat a simple plaque. It read, "In memory of Pete Thompson, who offered a cup of coffee to aliens and changed the galaxy forever. Warning, don't mess with baristas." The greatest irony, the Confederation's surrender document had been signed using coffee as ink. Some say if you listen carefully in any space station coffee shop, you can still hear Pete laughing.